What is albedo?
Albedo is the amount of the sun's energy that is reflected back from the surface of the Earth. Overall, about 33% of the sun's energy bounces off the Earth and its atmosphere and travels back into space. Albedo is usually expressed as a percentage.
Why don't lakes and ponds freeze solid in the winter?
When ice forms in lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water, it floats to the surface because liquid water is denser than solid ice. As water cools below 38 degrees Fahrenheit 3.3 degrees Celsius, it becomes less and less dense, and thus more buoyant. This is good news for fish and other plants and animals that live in small bodies of water, since they can live below the layer of ice that forms.
Is it true that no two snowflakes are exactly the same shape?
Some snowflakes may have strikingly similar shapes, but these twins are probably not molecularly identical. In 1986, cloud physicist Nancy Knight believed she found a uniquely cloned pair of crystals on an oil-coated slide that had been hanging from an airplane. This pair may have been the result of breaking off from a star crystal, or were attached side by side, thereby experiencing the same weather conditions simultaneously. Unfortunately, the smaller aspects of each of the snow crystals could not be studied because the photograph was unable to capture possible molecular differences. So, even if the human eye may see twin flakes, on a minuscule level these flakes are different.
When adding antifreeze to a car, should you gauge the amount based on expected low temperatures or expected low wind chills?
After referring to your car's owner's manual, add the appropriate amount of antifreeze to protect your radiator at the lowest expected air temperatures for your region. You can research the internet sites such as www.weather.com are helpful to find what the expected low is for your area. This generally works for urban areas. But if you live in a rural area, you might wish to subtract an additional 20 degrees Fahrenheit 9.5 degrees Celsius to be safe.
What is seafloor spreading?
Seafloor spreading is one of the processes that helps move the lithospheric plates around the world. The process is slow but continuous, like a hot, bubbling stew on the stove. The even hotter asthenospheric mantle rises to the surface and spreads laterally, transporting oceans and continents as if they were on a slow conveyor belt. This area is usually called a mid-ocean ridge, such as the Mid-Atlantic Ridge System in the Atlantic Ocean. The newly created lithosphere eventually cools as it gets farther from the spreading center. This is why the oceanic lithosphere is youngest at the Miocene ridges and gets progressively older farther away. As it cools, it becomes more dense. Because of this, it rides lower in the underlying asthenosphere, which is why the oceans are deepest away from the spreading centers and more shallow at the mid-ocean ridges. After thousands to millions of years, the cooled area reaches another plate boundary, either subducting, colliding, or rubbing past another plate. If part of the plate subducts, it will eventually be heated and recycled back into the mantle, rising again in millions of years at another or the same spreading center.
How many F5 tornadoes have there been in the United States since 1970?
There have been 28 F5 tornadoes in the United States since 1970. 6 of these occurred during the tornado outbreak of April 1974.
How much volcanic activity occurs underwater?
There is a huge amount of volcanic activity taking place underwater, we just can't see it. Some geologists estimate that approximately 80% of all Earth's volcanic activity occurs on the ocean floor.
What is the air pressure on top of Mt. Everest?
Mountain climbers ascending the peak of Mt. Everest, 29,029 feet, 8,848 meters. Will find the air pressure to be about a third of what they are used to. That's important not so much because of the pressure itself, but because it means there is also 2/3 less oxygen to breathe. When climbers reach 26,246 feet, 8,000 meters, they are at the point above which is the death zone. Many people carry oxygen tanks with them when they reach this height, although some consider it a particular test of their mettle to go without. High-altitude sickness hypoxia causes fatigue, distorted vision, confusion, and loss of memory and appetite. Cerebral and pulmonary edema will set in if a person goes too long before returning to normal air pressure, and this can prove fatal within a couple of days. Frigid temperatures and lack of oxygen have killed dozens of people who have attempted to reach the top of the world. Overall, more than 150 climbers have died on the world's tallest mountain.
Do wind farms affect the weather?
Yes, to a degree. A 2008 study showed that large wind farms actually have an impact on local weather and climate. When one thinks about it, this makes sense. Farmers have for years been using large fans to decrease humidity and warm crops when there is a risk of a freeze. Wind farms, too, cause a decrease in humidity and raise temperatures, especially during the morning hours.
What is an acre-foot?
One acre-foot is equal to 43,560 gallons, 164,875 liters, of water. Which is what it would take to bury an acre of land in a foot of water. The term is usually used to measure rainfall runoff, reservoir capacity, and irrigation.
What is an ionospheric storm?
When a coronal mass ejection, solar flare, occurs on the Sun's surface. It can dramatically increase the amount of photoionization in the ionosphere. An overwhelming amount of free electrons in the upper atmosphere results. And this can cause problems with radio communications.
What chemicals are used in thermometers?
The two liquids that are typically used in a thermometer are mercury or alcohol. The alcohol in thermometers is dyed red to be easier to read, while mercury has a silver color. Both liquids work well in determining temperature, but alcohol thermometers are safer. Should a mercury thermometer break or leak, the liquid metal inside could evaporate and the fumes are toxic. Also, mercury tends to expand or contract more slowly than alcohol. Mercury, furthermore, can't measure temperatures below -38 degrees Fahrenheit. -38.9 degrees Celsius, because that is the point at which it turns into a solid. The disadvantage of alcohol, however, is that it tends to evaporate or polymerize over time.
Is there a connection between global warming and geology?
Yes, there is an indirect connection between global warming and geology. Because changes in one part of the Earth's complex systems affect other parts. In particular, a change in the global atmosphere, and biosphere, can affect the rock cycle. A rise in sea level can change the expanse of glacial ice, change positions of deserts, and cause ocean waters to inundate coastlines, all of which would change rates and types of weathering taking place on our planet. Another important connection involves dissolved carbon dioxide in the oceans and surface water. Undoubtedly, the gas is taken up by organisms. But it also precipitates out of the ocean and surface waters to form certain sedimentary rocks. Carbon dioxide then returns to the system from a multitude of places, including the dissolution of carbonate minerals in rocks and shells, weathering of carbonate minerals, volcanic eruptions, or hot springs. Reactions with the atmosphere, respiration of organisms, and through streams and groundwater. Most scientists agree that a major change in the amount of carbon dioxide in or out of the environment can affect us all. Not only would humans and other living organisms be affected, but also the natural cycles connected to the world's geology. Still another geologic global warming connection may be found in the weather and climate. If global warming continues, more powerful and intense weather systems may develop. Such events as super hurricanes would cause a great deal of erosion along coastlines, not to mention deluging countless rivers and creeks inland. In terms of climate change, variations in vegetation patterns could contribute to more erosion in various areas. Glacial, polar, and sea ice would change drastically, altering the amount of radiation reflected back into space, thus enhancing the warming effect. And changes in the hydrologic cycle would alter stream flow and groundwater levels.
What remarkable observation did science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke make?
Arthur C. Clarke, 1917 to 2008, is well known to science fiction fans. His 1948 short story The Sentinel was the basis for the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Among his many accomplishments, he was also very interested in satellites. During World War II, Clarke was a radar technician for the Royal Air Force. And in 1945 he proposed designs for a communications system using satellites. He reasoned that this was possible if satellites could be placed in orbit above the equator while traveling 22,248 miles, 35,797 kilometers, per hour. This would put them in geostationary orbit, meaning that each satellite would remain directly above a predetermined point on the Earth's surface. This idea proved correct, and is used now for both communications and weather satellites. The Clarke Belt, a band of space over the equator at an altitude of 22,300 miles, 35,800 kilometers, where geostationary satellites may orbit, is named in his honor.
Is there such a thing as a monochromatic rainbow?
There have, indeed, been rare reports of all red or all white rainbows.
Why is there a hole in the ozone layer?
The ozone layer is not evenly distributed around the planet. It is thicker around the equator and nearby latitudes and thinner as one progresses north and south. This is true of the Earth's atmosphere in general because the planet's spin causes the planet to bulge slightly around the middle. The gravitational pull is consequently a little weaker and the atmosphere thickens. At the poles, the atmosphere is thinner, including the ozone layer. In addition, because ozone is dependent upon the interaction of sunlight and oxygen, there is naturally less ozone at the poles. Furthermore, ozone layers fluctuate naturally over time due to numerous factors affecting climate and sunlight levels. Since 1975, scientists believe that more than 33% of the ozone layer has disappeared. There is a seasonal factor to the reduction in ozone at any given time during the year, too. At different times, the ozone layer naturally declines or rises. But scientists also know that chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which are used for air conditioning, aerosol sprays, and halon in fire extinguishers, along with methane, CH4, and nitrous oxide, NO2, are broken down by UV radiation, freeing carbon, chlorine, and nitrogen atoms that then react with ozone molecules and destroy them. CFCs are particularly bad because they last so long in the atmosphere. One CFC molecule can destroy 100,000 molecules of ozone.
Are there ways I can anticipate a tornado?
Tornadoes are hard to predict with any certainty. And even meteorologists can only issue tornado advisories when conditions are right. Some people believe that hail, wind, or lightning will always precede a tornado, but that is not always the case. Though large hailstones and other inclement weather do often occur beforehand. Another belief is that if you observe the readings on a barometer suddenly dropping, you can expect a tornado to soon form. This is not an accurate method of prediction, either. Such air pressure drops can occur hours or days before an actual tornado hits. The best strategy is to simply listen closely to weather forecasts during bed storms and trust meteorologists to issue warnings when the conditions merit caution.
Do loud noises trigger avalanches?
The notion that making loud noises, such as shouting or clapping one's hands, near dangerous snow conditions will trigger an avalanche is an old myth. Actually, it would take a tremendous sound, such as a nearby sonic boom where an avalanche is about to occur anyway, for noise to make a difference. In 90% of cases, avalanches are precipitated by a person's or persons' weight, or the weight of a snowmobile or other machine, on top of unstable snow.
What is wind?
Wind, simply put, is the movement of air in the atmosphere. Wind movement is caused by the fact that air will move from high pressure areas to low pressure areas.
How hard is it to become a meteorologist who is a radio or television broadcaster?
If your goal is to specifically become a television weatherman or weatherwoman, then, ideally, you need to combine training in meteorology with education in communications and/or the broadcast arts. You should be comfortable appearing on camera. And it helps if you have completed an internship in broadcasting while in school. As with anyone who wishes to pursue a television or radio career, you will have to sell yourself as an appealing on-air personality. Prepare professional demo tapes of yourself doing a broadcast and send these to news directors at the stations for which you wish to work. You should prepare yourself to start at the bottom of the career ladder, which means working shifts in the very early morning or very late evening hours, as well as working for low pay in a town or city that has a small market. Don't expect to work right away for a big network in New York City or Los Angeles. It could be years before you manage to get a job in a big market. And in the meantime you will likely move frequently while you search for better and better opportunities. Today's media world is especially challenging, as stations and newspapers across the United States are cutting their budgets and centralizing operations. Weather broadcasting is probably the hardest specialty to get into these days. And many other fields within meteorology offer better opportunities.
Does water always freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius?
The standard that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 degrees Celsius, is only true when the air pressure is exactly 1 atmosphere. And when the water is fresh water and not salt water or some other form of water with impurities in it. Salt water, depending on the percent of salinity, freezes at a lower temperature than fresh water. And when the air pressure is greater than 1 atmosphere, the melting point of fresh water is lowered. However, it takes a lot of pressure to make a difference. To lower the freezing point of water to 30 degrees Fahrenheit 1 degree Celsius, you must exert a pressure equal to 134 atmospheres. Because water droplets in clouds must condense around impurities such as dust, they do not necessarily freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit but can remain in a liquid state at temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit -40 degrees Celsius. In other words, the water droplets cannot form ice until they begin to make contact with each other around a nucleus so they can form a crystal lattice. On the other hand, icebergs in the salty oceans are frozen at about the normal freezing point because icebergs are actually formed of fresh water. This happens because ice in the oceans is often formed slowly, allowing the ice crystals to force out impurities such as salt. On the other hand, ice flow sections of the Arctic ice sheet that break away each summer are composed of sea ice. Seawater begins to freeze at 28 degrees Fahrenheit -2 degrees Celsius when there is no surface turbulence. Another interesting property of ice on frozen lakes or in skating rinks is how friction makes ice skating possible. It was once believed that the pressure of an ice skate blade against the ice surface changed the state of the water from solid to liquid, thus creating a slippery surface on which to glide. More recently, it has been concluded that it is the friction of the blade against the ice that melts it and makes ice skating possible.
What was the world's worst nuclear disaster?
In April 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Ukraine, near the border with Belarus, had a major accident that released radiation into the atmosphere. The protective covering of the nuclear reactor exploded and deadly radiation escaped, immediately killing at least 28 people and giving 240 others radiation sickness, 19 of whom later died as a result. The radiation exposure that initially occurred is still killing people through related diseases, especially thyroid cancer, and this will continue for many years. More than 100,000 people were evacuated from the region, and deaths due to radiation poisoning continue as radioactive isotopes spread across Europe. The radiation cloud that resulted from the disaster traveled more than 1,300 miles. 2,000 kilometers, infecting crops and livestock that then became unsafe to eat.
Do any other objects in the solar system have magnetic fields that flip upside down?
Yes, all planets and stars with magnetospheres are thought to undergo magnetic polarity reversals. The Sun, for example, undergoes a magnetic field polarity reversal every 11 years. Astronomers can see and study this effect in other astronomical bodies, and from them, learn more about the changes in Earth's own magnetic field.
What unexpected cooling phenomena are happening because of global warming?
It might be counterintuitive, but as the globe seems to warm, temperature readings indicate summer maximum temperatures are on the decline. However, at the same time, winter minimum temperatures are on the rise, so that the overall average has been an increase in temperature. Meanwhile, up in the stratosphere, the temperature has been cooling even as surface temperatures warm up. The reason for this is the destruction of ozone gases, which absorb ultraviolet radiation, which generates heat. The less ozone, the more UV radiation gets through the stratosphere, so it does not have as much of a chance to warm up. Records taken since 1979 show that 3 of the coldest Stratospheric readings have been in 1997, 2000, and 2006.
What is an urban ice slab?
Just as urban areas can cause problems related to heat, they also can make winters more hazardous. When ice forms on skyscrapers and other tall buildings, a dangerous situation may arise upon thawing. Large sheets of ice have been known to break off of structures and plummet to the streets below. One notable case of this happening occurred in Chicago, Illinois, in April 1995. When the danger of urban ice slabs dropping onto Michigan Avenue compelled authorities to close the street for hours.
When are you most likely to see sprites and blue jets?
The best chance to see one of these brief, strange lights is in the middle of the night. When you are near a strong thunderstorm and far away from the light pollution of a city or town. The storm should be more than 100 miles, 161 kilometers away, but no more than 300 miles, 482 kilometers, distant. Estimate the height of the storm clouds. Then multiply that by 8 to get the approximate altitude where the sprites and blue jets may appear. Sprites may appear as reddish, orange, white, or even greenish flashes. Blue jets are even harder to see, but you are more likely to view them if the storm includes hail.
When were the phenomenon of trade winds first explained, and by whom?
Astronomer Edmund Halley, 1656 to 1742, who is usually thought of as the discoverer of the comet that bears his name, was also interested in cartography, oceanography, and the atmosphere. For instance, he created tidal charts and maps illustrating the path of ecliptic shadows. In 1868, he formed a theory to explain why we have the trade winds. Halley correctly guessed that it had to do with warm tropical air mixing with cooler air from more northern and southern latitudes. His idea, though, did not adequately explain why the winds blow from east to west, rather than south to north, as his theory would have indicated. It took English meteorologist George Hadley's, 1685 to 1768, discovery of convection cells to amend the theory correctly in 1735.
What did Sir Isaac Newton contribute to the science of meteorology?
In terms of meteorology, Sir Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727, is mostly a significant figure because the science of physics and his laws of motion are essential to an understanding of how weather works. Not many people know, though, that Newton also was into rainbows. He was the first to demonstrate how white light is broken. up into its spectrum when it passes through a glass prism.
Why was Hero of Alexandria an important figure in the history of meteorology?
We have Hero, c. 10 to 70 CE, also spelled as Heron, to thank for being the first to scientifically prove that air consists of matter. A genius who invented an early steam engine and showed you could harness wind's power with a windmill. Hero showed that air had volume, therefore, matter, with such creations as the pump and the syringe.
What was the weather like in China in 2008?
The winter of 2008 was one of the coldest on record in China. Even cities in South China, including Hong Kong, experienced record lows and power outages that sometimes lasted weeks. Over 100 people died as a result of the frigid weather.
Is the hole in the ozone layer causing frog species extinctions?
Biologists have known for a long time that frogs are very vulnerable to changes in their environment. Frogs across the globe were being found with deformities, such as extra legs, and species were going extinct. By the mid-1990s, it was still being speculated that the cause of the mutations was the weakened ozone layer, which was allowing too much ultraviolet radiation to filter onto the planet. Today, however, most scientists believe that the culprit is fertilizers leaking into the lakes and rivers where frogs live. The fertilizers cause certain types of snail species to thrive, and these snails often host parasites. The parasites, in turn, infect frogs when they are still in their tadpole stage. Cysts form on the tadpoles, which creates the mutations that are being observed. Besides the malformations seen in frogs, there is another, even more troubling concern. Many species of frogs, some estimate about 100 species, are vulnerable or threatened with extinction, and many others have already disappeared. In this case, the culprit is global warming. Because frogs have thin skin, they are vulnerable to environmental changes. Increased temperatures have caused fungi. Some scientists specifically blame the chytrid fungus to infect frog skin, and this leads to the lethal disease Batrachochythrium dendrobatitis, BD. The good news is that it is easy to treat and cure frogs. The bad news is that even if they are treated, once released back into the wild they are likely to be reinfected. To help arrest the extinction rate, zoos around the world have been rescuing sample populations and breeding them in captivity.
Was the sun generating less energy at its core than expected? Was nuclear fusion theory wrong?
The problem was finally solved nearly 4 decades after it was first discovered. Neutrinos, as it turns out, can actually change their characteristics when they strike Earth's atmosphere. That meant that there were the right number of neutrinos leaving the Sun. But so many of them changed flavor upon reaching Earth that they escaped detection by the neutrino telescopes deep underground. This discovery was a major breakthrough in fundamental physics. It confirmed very important properties about neutrinos that have major implications on the basic nature of matter in the universe.
How many people died as a result of the subsequent failure of the levees and flooding after Hurricane Katrina struck?
The accepted final figures state that 836 people lost their lives following the landfall of Hurricane Katrina.
What do the colors shown on television radars indicate?
Colors on weather maps shown on television news programs are indications of precipitation levels. Cooler colors, blue, green, etc., indicate light precipitation. While warmer colors, yellow, orange, red, are used for heavier precipitation.
What is a steam devil?
In the Arctic, and, less often, Antarctic, or any other place where conditions are right. Cold air passing over warm areas of water can cause steam to rise. And when a whirlwind sweeps in at the same time, this steam or fog forms small steam devils.
Who was that?
Dutch chemist Martinus van Marum, 1750 to 1837, discovered ozone around the year 1785. While conducting experiments with electricity. As many high school science students now do. Van Marum smelled a distinctive odor while working with oxygen and electricity. Van Marum, who is also credited with discovering carbon monoxide, did not, however, identify the source of the odor as a unique gas molecule. It was not until 1840 that German-Swiss chemist Christian Friedrich Schonbein 1799 to 1868, correctly identified ozone as a gas, which he named after the Greek ozeon, meaning smell. Finally, Swiss chemist J. L. Sarret worked out its chemical structure as being a molecule consisting of 3 bonded oxygen atoms, O3.
Are there other ways that thunderstorms can be described?
Classifying thunderstorms can be a rather subjective practice. but meteorologists do give different types of storms other names based on how they are formed, including mesoscale convective systems, a large, non-frontal thunderstorm. This classification includes mesoscale convective complexes, which are enormous storm systems that can cover several U.S. states at once and last for half a day or more. Air mass thunderstorm, a common, short-lived, relatively unorganized, and fairly small storm. Sea breeze thunderstorm, cold frontal storms that form as wind blows in toward the coastline.
How much time does it take for sunlight to reach the Earth?
The speed of light is about 186,000 miles, 300,000 kilometers, per second, and the Sun is about 92.58 million miles. 149 million kilometers, away, so it takes sunlight 8.4 minutes to reach our planet. Therefore, the Sun we see in the sky is actually as the star appeared over 8 minutes ago. Not to paint too depressing a picture, but if the Sun went nova, no one on Earth would realize the end was near for 8.5 minutes.
What is convergence?
Convergence occurs when air masses approach each other from different directions. As the masses collide, air pressure between them goes up, which causes air to flow upwards.
What does a 40% chance of rain really mean?
When the morning weather report speaks of a 40% chance of rain, it means that throughout the area, usually the metropolitan area, there is a 4 in 10 chance that at least 0.001 of an inch of rain, 0.0025 centimeters, will fall on any given point in the area.
What is the tablecloth cloud?
The Table Mountain near Cape Town, South Africa, is sometimes covered by a thin sheet of clouds when air is flowing off the top of the mountain in all directions. When this happens, the resulting cloud formation looks like a linen sheet. Hence, local people have named it the tablecloth.
What is the coldest city in America's lower 48 states?
Butte, Montana, holds the honor of being the coldest city in the contiguous 48 states. The temperature in Butte falls below the freezing point 223 days each year, on average.
What U.S. cities receive the most sunlight annually?
Yuma, Arizona, is regarded as the sunniest city in the United States. With about 4,000 hours of sunlight every year. Below are some other sunny cities for those who are averse to rainfall. Because what constitutes a sunny day is debatable, the figures are estimates of the percentage of hours of annual sunshine, or what meteorologists call the mean percentage of possible sunshine.
Can a lightning stroke cause you to burst into flames?
No, being hit by lightning will not make you combust, but it can leave burn marks or singe clothing.
How do I convert Fahrenheit to Celsius or Kelvin?
Fahrenheit and Celsius are two common temperature scales used throughout the world. Temperature in Fahrenheit can be converted to Celsius by subtracting 32 and multiplying by 5. Divide that number by 9 and you have Celsius. Conversely, you can convert Celsius to Fahrenheit by adding 32, multiplying by 9 and finally dividing by 5. Kelvin, a system used by scientists, is based on the same scale as Celsius. All you have to do is add 273 to your Celsius temperature to obtain Kelvin. 0 degrees Kelvin is negative 273 degrees Celsius.
What is the purpose of a snow fence?
Snow fences are usually installed in places where there is not much in the way of vegetation or buildings to keep winds from blowing and drifting snow. The fences create wind turbulence that prevents drifting downwind of the fence.
What causes a flood?
Flooding results when more water enters an environment than can be easily absorbed into the soil or drained away in rivers and streams. Flooding is usually caused by intense rainfalls that dump many inches of water onto an area over a short period of time, or they can also be caused by ocean swells and storm surges initiated by hurricanes and tropical storms. Tsunamis, naturally, also cause flooding. The 2004 tsunamis that resulted in an undersea earthquake in the Indian Ocean, for instance, killed about 238,000 people in 11 surrounding countries. Most of these people died from the initial landfall of the waves and resulting floods. In addition, floods can be caused artificially, such as when a dam or levee breaks.
Is it a good idea to open windows and doors so that air pressure is equalized inside a house?
There is a long-standing myth that when a tornado is near a home it lowers the air pressure outside so much that the higher interior pressure in a house will cause it to explode. This is not true. Tornadoes damage and rip apart houses simply by virtue of wind speeds and the debris they blow about. Opening doors and windows increases the possibility that flying objects will enter the home and possibly hit those hiding inside.
Is air pollution destroying our architectural history?
Yes. Many important buildings and monuments around the world are slowly being destroyed by air pollution and acid rain. The famous Taj Mahal in Agra, India, for instance, is turning from white to yellow because of pollution from car exhaust. So the local government has banned automobile traffic from coming closer than 1.25 miles, 2 kilometers. In other locales, the Sphinx in Egypt and the Parthenon in Greece are both being eaten away by acid rains. The acids are produced by sulfur dioxide mixing with water to form sulfuric acid solutions. This is particularly damaging to structures built from limestone and sandstone, common materials used by many civilizations throughout history, which are turned into powdery gypsum as a result. Over time, layers of building material crumble and turn to dust.
Who first theorized that human activities were causing climate change?
The Swedish scientists Svante August Arrhenius, 1859–1927, who was one of the founders of the discipline of physical chemistry, is sometimes credited as the first person to discuss in detail the effects of carbon dioxide, CO2, on Earth's climate. Arrhenius came upon his theory while studying past ice ages, and in 1896 published a paper in which he proposed that ice ages occur when CO2 levels go down. By his estimates, doubling CO2 amounts would increase average world temperatures by about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, and having the levels of this gas would have the opposite effect. Recent modeling studies come quite close to Arrhenius's original estimate. Unlike today's environmentalists and climatologists, however, the Swedish scientist believed that global warming would be a good thing for two reasons. It would help prevent another ice age and it would aid in crop production to feed a hungry world.
What was the first organized network of meteorological observatories?
In 1855 Urbain Jean-Joseph Leverrier, 1811–1877, a French astronomer, organized an effort to establish weather observatories throughout Europe that would share meteorological data in the first cooperative system of its kind. In 1863 telegraphs linked many of these weather stations together through a central hub in France.
What is the difference between a hurricane watch and a warning?
Somewhat like with tornado watches and warnings. A hurricane watch means that conditions are good, that a hurricane will form within the next 36 hours or so. A hurricane warning means that a hurricane is expected to make landfall within 24 hours. Warnings and watches are issued by the National Weather Service's National Hurricane Center.
Does thunder cause milk to go sour?
No, this is an old wives' tale. It may have stemmed from the fact that thunderstorms occur in times of heat and humidity, which are conditions that, in themselves, can turn milk sour.
What are the different scales of atmospheric motion?
Meteorologists divide weather patterns and motions based on actions that are occurring at various scales of size. Just as economists have macroeconomics, how the economy functions on a regional, national, or international level, and microeconomics, financial concepts applied to a single household or business. Meteorologists find it convenient to divide weather phenomena this way, too. Below is an explanation of the divisions. The macro scale, or synoptic scale, refers to weather processes affecting large areas, such as pressure systems, fronts, and the jet stream. The microscale concerns highly localized events, such as a tornado, a fog bank, or a small rain shower that affects an area of only a few hundred square feet or meters. The mesoscale deals with weather events somewhere between the micro and macro levels, usually ranging over several miles to 100 miles or so. Thunderstorms, cloud systems, and breeze fronts are some examples of weather falling into this category. The mesoscale is sometimes divided even further into one, mesogamma, covering about 1 to 12 miles 2 to 20 kilometers, 2, mesobeta, 25 to 125 miles 20 to 200 kilometers. And 3, meso-alpha, 125 to 1250 miles 200 to 2000 kilometers.
What is the difference between absolute and specific humidity?
Absolute humidity given in grams per cubic meter is the amount of water vapor in a cubic meter of air. Specific humidity is the amount of water vapor per gram of air.
What is airglow?
If you could remove all the illumination coming from city lights, the stars, and moon, and from aurora, the night sky would still have a faint, greenish glow to it. This is caused by oxygen atoms about 60 miles, 100 kilometers, high being excited by radiation from space. Other colors coming from different elements are also possible, but the green from oxygen predominates. This phenomenon is sometimes called the permanent aurora.
Does irrigation of farmland affect the climate?
Extensive land irrigation can, indeed, affect the weather. As of 2000, the total amount of land on Earth that has been irrigated is about 689 million acres. About 60% of the world's fresh water supplies are used toward this purpose, representing 137 billion gallons, 518.5 billion liters, of water daily. As one might imagine, when all of this water is spread over cropland, a certain amount of it will evaporate into the atmosphere. Hydrologists believe that this amount of evaporation is enough to increase the number of rainstorms that would otherwise occur.
What are noctilucent clouds?
Forming at altitudes of 47 to 56 miles, 75 to 90 kilometers. These are the highest clouds you'll see in our atmosphere. Blown about by upper atmosphere winds averaging 100 miles, 161 kilometers, an hour. These cirrus-like clouds only form during the summer, and only at latitudes of 50 to 75 degrees north and 40 to 60 degrees south. They are usually seen at twilight and have a bluish or silvery color, sometimes flecked with red. It is speculated that noctilucent clouds may form as a result of meteor dust in the upper atmosphere because these clouds are more common when meteor activity increases.
What will happen when Earth's magnetic field flips upside down?
Probably not much will happen to our daily lives when Earth's magnetic field undergoes a polarity reversal. Measurements over the years show that there has been about a 6% reduction in the strength of Earth's magnetic field in the past century. So some scientists think that a polarity reversal on Earth will likely happen sooner rather than later. Some non-scientific hypotheses have been put forth, suggesting that there will be an environmental catastrophe as a result. There is no scientific reason to believe, however, that such disasters will occur.
What is Arctic sea smoke?
When extremely cold air blows over Arctic ice packs, the warmer sea water beneath causes fog to form when it comes into contact with the colder air. As the fog rises, it may appear to be smoke plumes.
What is syzygy?
Syzygy occurs when the moon and sun are aligned, an event that happens twice monthly. The effect on Earth is that the gravitational pull of these two space bodies is strengthened, increasing the elevation of high tides and decreasing low tides.
What are the fastest currents in the world's oceans?
The fastest known current is part of the Gulf Stream system. It heads north from the southern tip of Florida toward Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, flowing up to 3.3 to 6.6 feet. 1 to 2 meters per second, with some estimates as high as 7.5 feet, 2.3 meters per second. The Kuroshio current in the Pacific Ocean runs a close second in terms of speed around 1.3 to 4 feet, 0.4 to 1.2 meters per second.
What are the sources of air pollution?
Air pollution can be in the form of either a gas or an aerosol. And it can either be anthropogenic, man-made, or natural. Man-made sources of pollution include factories, cars, motorcycles, ships, incinerators, wood and coal burning, oil refining, chemicals, consumer product emissions like aerosol sprays and fumes from paint, methane from garbage in landfills, and pollution from nuclear and biological weapons production and testing.
What incident do many literary scholars believe inspired William Shakespeare to write The Tempest?
The Tempest is considered to be the last play completed by the famous British playwright William Shakespeare, 1564 to 1616. It is a mystical, romantic play about shipwrecked sailors who find themselves on an island inhabited by good and evil creatures. Many scholars believe it was inspired by the story of the Sea Venture, a ship that sank near the Bahamas in 1609 because of a hurricane. The captain's decision to crash the ship on a reef resulted in his saving 150 of his crew.
What is Doppler radar?
Doppler radar measures frequency differences between signals bouncing off objects moving away from or toward it. By measuring the difference between the transmitted and received frequencies, Doppler radar calculates the speed of the air in which the rain, snow, ice crystals, and even insects are moving. It can then be used to predict speed and direction of wind and amount of precipitation associated with a storm.
What are the different types of satellites used today?
The two types of satellites used for weather observations are geostationary and polar orbiting. Geostationary satellites remain above a fixed point on the Earth's equator by traveling at a speed that matches that of the planet's spin. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth from pole to pole. These satellites orbit at a speed so that, 2 times a day, they are over the exact same spot on the planet in what is called a sun-synchronous orbit.
How have dams affected the planet's water cycle in a significant way?
Currently, there are about 40,000 large dams, dams higher than 15 feet 5 meters. In the world, with 19,000 of those being in China and about 5,500 in the United States. By erecting dams that block effectively 15% of the fresh water flow on the planet's surface, people have changed the Earth's water cycle significantly. Water cycle changes can, in turn, change such things as temperature and cloud formation. Naturally, the bigger the dam, and the reservoir created behind it, the greater the effect. China's Three Gorges Dam, located on the Yangtze River, is a huge dam that creates 20 times the kilowatts as America's famous Hoover Dam. The reservoir created by Three Gorges contains over 5 trillion gallons, 19 trillion liters, of water and is over 400 square miles, 1,036 square kilometers, in surface area. Scientists have observed that the climate around the dam has cooled and that rainfall has also changed.
What is the air quality index?
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, developed the Air Quality Index as a measure to better advise citizens of pollutants in the atmosphere. To calculate the index, the EPA takes into account levels of carbon monoxide, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. Each pollutant is measured in parts per billion and compared to an acceptable standard over a certain period of time. 24 hours for most pollutants, but ozone is calculated over an 8-hour period. This number is then multiplied by 100 to give the air quality index. In other words, the formula would be pollutant concentration, / pollutant goal concentration, x 100 equals air quality index. The table below explains the different categories in the index.
Who first proposed the idea of ice ages?
Several scientists over the centuries came close to proposing the idea of ice ages. Scottish naturalist James Hutton, 1726 to 1797, observed strangely shaped glacial boulders. Erratics, near Geneva, Switzerland. Based on this, he published his theory in 1795 that alpine glaciers were more extensive in the past. In 1824, Jens S. Mark. 1763 to 1839, proposed that past glaciation had occurred on a much larger continental scale. But the most persuasive argument for ice ages came in 1837, when Swiss-American geologist Louis Agassiz 1807 to 1873, gave his now famous speech on past widespread ice age conditions. He proposed that nearly all of northern Europe and Britain had once been covered by ice. And he subsequently found evidence for his theory in New England. Others eventually uncovered additional evidence. In 1839, United States geologist Timothy Conrad 1803 to 1877, discovered evidence of polished rocks, striations, and erratic boulders in western New York, supporting Agassiz's theory that Ice Age glaciation was worldwide. In 1842, the first attempt to explain the Ice Ages using an astronomical connection was made by French scientist Joseph Hadamard, 1797 to 1862. He proposed that the ice ages were the result of the 22,000-year precession of the equinox, a natural movement of the Earth's axis that causes the seasons to switch over thousands of years. In other words, the current summer months would become winter months and vice versa.
How much water is contained in snow?
Depending on conditions and as anyone who has had to shovel snow can attest to, snow can range from light and fluffy to heavy, dense, and slushy. As a general rule of thumb, however, every 10 inches of snowfall that accumulates on the ground would equal about an inch of rain if it all melted.
How many times does lightning strike the Earth each year?
About 20 million bolts of lightning are generated in the atmosphere every year. And during any particular second about 100 to 125 lightning strokes are occurring on our planet. Thunderstorms are very common in the Earth's atmosphere, with about 1,500 to 2,000 such storms being active at any given time. For astronauts circling the Earth's night side, this makes for an exciting view as numerous white flashes are easily viewed from a space shuttle or from the International Space Station.